Space travel ain't all it's cracked up to be. Sure, you get to see stars, but they're generally trying to kill you in some spectacular fashion. Take the interplanetary highway, for instance. A marvel of modern engineering, they said. A seamless connection between worlds, they claimed. Just don't mind the constant threat of obliteration by sentient planets having a bad day. Cassian Voss, lone human and part-time masochist, navigated this high-speed death trap in a ship that looked like it came from a junkyard's discount bin. The Starwies might not have been pretty, but it had a charm, like a rusted knife that still had enough bite. Every knob on the console had a story, each one ending with, "And that's why it's taped down now." "Come on, girl, don't let me down today," Cassian muttered to his ship, patting the dashboard like a dog that just bit him. In return, the ship gave a wheezy cough, the kind of sound you'd expect from your granddad after a nice lungful of space dust. He checked the nav screen, which flickered with all the enthusiasm of a dying light bulb. The coordinates for not getting blown to bits were apparently not in the database. Outside the cockpit window, two planets were having a lover's quarrel, trading asteroids like nasty insults. You'd think sentient celestial bodies would know better than to hurl space debris at each other, but apparently nobody had taught them about good manners or the concept of collateral damage. Cassian sighed. Intergalactic divorce court must be packed this time of year, he mused. He flipped a switch, activating the ship's comm system. "Any sentient planets listening, this is Cassian Voss and I'm just passing through. Feel free to ignore me like everyone else does." Silence. Not even a courtesy beep. The planets were too busy trying to one-up each other in an orbital pissing contest. Cassian had one job, and that was to stay alive long enough to deliver his testimony in the biggest galactic trial since someone had the bright idea of weaponizing space dust. His role, key witness. Apparently, being the only human to survive a sentient planet's temper tantrum makes you a VIP, or at least that's what the galactic judiciary seemed to think. "You're important, Cassian," they'd said. "Your testimony could change everything." Yeah, right. The universe had a history of taking his grand plans and turning them into cosmic jokes. But he had to admit, the thought of being the star of a trial that might decide the fate of sentient planets had a nice ring to it. Maybe he'd get a medal, maybe even a ship that didn't require duct tape and prayers to stay airborne. The ship's alarm blared, yanking Cassian out of his daydream. "Hull breach imminent," it chimed in its best "you're screwed" tone. "Fantastic," Cassian muttered, slamming a fist on the control panel to shut the alarm up. If he was about to be flash-fried by flying planetary shrapnel, he'd at least do it in peace. He pushed the Starwies to its limits, which, judging by the groans of protest, was about as far as a marathon runner with a sprained ankle. The ship rattled like a tin can down a gravel road, and Cassian was pretty sure he heard something important clank loose. Probably the engine, or maybe his sanity. Cassian flipped the comm open again, because talking to yourself was the first sign of genius or madness, and he was banking on the former. "If anyone's listening, I'll take a miracle right about now. Feel free to throw in some chilled beer, too." As if answering his call, the universe offered him a view of a nearby planet, Themis. Known for its neutrality, it hung there like a peace-loving hippie caught in the crossfire between the cosmic equivalent of a bar brawl. "You could at least try to mediate," Cassian quipped, half expecting the planet to sprout a face and offer him a stern talking to about his sarcastic tone. Instead, Themis twinkled in the dim starlight, blissfully detached from the chaos around it. A reminder that some things in this universe might still have their heads screwed on straight. Cassian could use a bit of that stability. "Okay, Themis, keep an eye out for me, will ya? I'm going in." The Starwies lurched forward, bravely or stupidly threading a path through the chaos. Cassian kept his hand steady on the controls, his eyes flicking between the debris outside and the ship's gauges, each more unhelpful than the last. The odds of his survival were about as good as finding a clean public restroom on a space station. "Think of it this way," he told himself. "If you survive, you'll have a hell of a story to tell. If you don't, well, at least you won't have to deal with payday loans and intergalactic tax forms. A particularly large chunk of asteroid spun towards him, and Cashin swerved, narrowly missing it by what felt like the width of a credit card. Note to self, send Mom a postcard if I live. Dear Mom, not dead yet. Love, Cass. The comm crackled to life and Cashin jumped. This is Themy's station control, a voice said, calm and professional, like they weren't watching the universe's longest-running demolition derby. You're entering restricted space. State your purpose. Oh, just sightseeing, Cashin replied. Thought I'd swing by and say hi before the planets around here decide to redecorate the galaxy with my remains. Acknowledged, the voice said, as if sarcasm was a second language to them. Proceed to docking bay 6, and try not to hit anything valuable. I'll do my best, Cashin muttered, guiding the Starwies towards the station. The docking procedure was about as smooth as a drunk rhino on roller skates. But against all odds, and with a few choice swear words, Cashin managed to land without converting the Starwies into a modern art installation. He powered down the ship and leaned back in his seat, letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Well, girl, we made it. Maybe the universe isn't completely out to get us after all. The ship's lights flickered, as if to remind him not to get too optimistic. Cashin stepped out of the cockpit, stretching muscles that felt like they'd been crammed into a box for too long. The dock was busy, but not overwhelmingly so. Just the usual assortment of spacefarers, traders, and other assorted misfits, each with their own stories, secrets, and likely a few bad habits. He made his way towards the station's central hub, where he was supposed to meet his contact. The place had a vibe that screamed, "Don't trust anyone," which was fine by Cashin. He didn't trust anyone, least of all himself. His contact, a sharply dressed woman with the kind of expression that said she'd seen it all and was thoroughly unimpressed, stood near the entrance to a seedy bar unimaginatively named Stars and Scars. She waved him over with the enthusiasm of someone being asked to eat a second helping of space broccoli. "Cashin Voss?" she asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. "That's the rumor," he replied, giving her his best "I'm harmless" grin. "You must be my babysitter." "I'm here to ensure you make it to the trial in one piece," she said, not bothering to hide her disdain for the task, "and to make sure you don't do anything stupid in the meantime." "Great," Cashin said. "I always wanted a chaperone." "What's your name, or should I just call you Hey You?" She hesitated, perhaps deciding whether or not he was worth the oxygen it would take to tell him. "Call me Sierra." "Nice to meet you, Sierra," Cashin said with mock sincerity. "And if I do something stupid, it'll be completely intentional." Sierra rolled her eyes, already regretting her assignment. "Let's get moving. The sooner we get you where you need to be, the sooner I can get back to doing something more worthwhile." Together, they navigated the station's winding corridors, passing shops and stalls filled with all manner of dubious goods. Cashin couldn't help but notice a stall selling genuine relics from Terran history, including what looked suspiciously like a toaster with ancient Earth technology scrawled on the side. "Relics of a bygone era," Cashin mused aloud, earning a sidelong glance from Sierra. "Focus, Voss," she snapped. "We're not here to shop." Right, Cashin said, quickening his pace to match hers. "So what's the plan once we get to the trial? Do I just stand there and look pretty, or is there more to it?" "You'll be briefed on your testimony," Sierra replied curtly. "But essentially, yes. Try not to embarrass yourself or, by extension, me." "No promises," Cashin said, grinning. "But I'll try not to call the judge Your Majesty." As they approached the main transit hub, Cashin felt a twinge of something he hadn't in years. Hope, maybe. Not the naive kind that everything would be rainbows and space ponies, but the gritty kind that said maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. Or at least survive long enough to find out. As they reached the embarkation point, Cashin paused, turning to Sierra. "Hey, thanks for not letting me crash and burn back there." Sierra shrugged, a flicker of something resembling a smile crossing her face. "Don't thank me yet, Voss. The hard part's just beginning. And with that, they stepped onto the transport, Cassion's mind buzzing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. Sentient planets, galactic trials, and a universe that seemed to enjoy kicking him when he was down. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss, sealing their fate for better or worse. Time to face the music, Cassion thought, steeling himself for whatever cosmic joke the universe had lined up next. Cassion leaned back in the uncomfortable transit seat, the kind designed to ensure you never considered becoming a long-haul traveler. Across from him, Sierra was busy pretending he didn't exist, or maybe she was meditating on how much she hated babysitting assignments. The transport hummed along the interplanetary highway, a corridor of controlled chaos that made Rush Ior on Earth look like a meditation retreat. Nice to know public transport hasn't improved, even in the future, Cassion quipped, breaking the silence. Thought this was supposed to be a utopian era of intergalactic travel. Sierra raised an eyebrow, not looking up from her data pad. The only utopian thing you'll find out here is the promise of a quick death if you step out of line. Cheerful. Ever considered motivational speaking as a backup career? She ignored him, or maybe she was just honing her selective hearing, a skill everyone in her line of work probably mastered. Cassion glanced around at the other passengers, an eclectic mix of alien species who all shared the same expression of grim determination. They were either heading to the same trial or fleeing something equally unpleasant. The transport lurched suddenly, like a drunkard sidestepping a puddle, and Cassion felt a familiar sense of dread tighten his gut. He leaned towards the small window beside him, trying to get a clearer view outside. The nav screen at the front of the cabin flickered in a fit of indecision about their current coordinates. Lovely, Cassion muttered. Nothing like flying blind in hostile territory. Sierra followed his gaze and sighed, more bored than concerned. It's probably just space debris, or a welcoming committee, Cassion added darkly. With party favors that explode, he wasn't entirely wrong. The thing about the interplanetary highway was that it was a favorite haunt for alien resistance fighters. They had a knack for making a mess of things, or, as they called it, strategic disruption. The flickering screen finally settled on a warning message that translated roughly to, "Buckle up, things are about to get interesting." Cassion felt the transport shake again, more violently this time. Sierra, this feels like more than a debris shower," he said, trying to keep his voice nonchalant. "We're on the highway to hell," Sierra replied dryly, finally shutting off her data pad. "This is what happens when you send every disgruntled alien with a grudge out to patrol the cosmos. Great. So, what's our plan?" "Sit here and hope they're not in the mood for target practice." Just as the words left his mouth, the transport gave another jolt, this time accompanied by a distinct metallic sound, a kind of cosmic rattle and hum that screamed incoming fire. Cassion's instincts kicked in. "We need to move." Now Sierra was already unbuckling, her expression the picture of practiced calm, like an actor who'd done this scene too many times to bother with stage fright. "Follow me, and try not to get yourself killed before the trial." They scrambled through the narrow aisle, jostling past passengers clutching their seats with the dedication of a drowning man holding onto flotsam. Cassion tried to ignore the growing smell of fear that clung to the air like an unwelcome cologne. As they reached the rear of the transport, Cassion caught sight of the resistance fighters through the window, sleek, angular ships darting in and out of view like predators chasing wounded prey. Their weapons systems glinted ominously in the starlight, promising more than just a nasty hangover. "Looks like they've got us surrounded," Cassion said, trying to inject levity into the situation even as his brain screamed, "Panic. Surrounded works both ways," Sierra pointed out, her voice tinged with a steely edge. "Means we know exactly where they are." Cassion wasn't sure if he should be impressed or terrified. Probably both. "You got a trick up your sleeve I should know about. I've got more than that." She pulled a compact device from her jacket, a cross between a detonator and a game controller. Standard issue for situations like this. Why do I get the feeling standard issue means might work, might kill us? Welcome to space, she said, pressing a series of buttons with grim determination. Hope you like fireworks. Cashin braced himself as Sierra's device came to life with a series of beeps and whirs. Outside, the resistance ships continued their encircling dance, seemingly oblivious to the impending surprise. 3, 2, 1, Sierra counted down, her voice a tightrope walk between confidence and desperation. Then, with a final press, she unleashed the device. A pulse of energy erupted from the transport, rippling outward like a cosmic wave. The resistance fighters' ships shuddered, their systems momentarily going haywire as they struggled to recalibrate. Cashin watched, awed despite himself, as several ships veered off course, colliding with each other in a display of interstellar slapstick. I'll give you this, Sierra. You sure know how to throw a party. Let's hope they don't RSVP, she replied, already moving towards the transport's escape pods. Come on, Voss. Time to bail. Cashin followed, his mind racing with 1,000 different scenarios, none of which ended particularly well. But he'd learned to take victories where he could find them, and today that meant not getting vaporized by alien rebels. As they clambered into the cramped escape pod, Cashin couldn't resist one last quip. So, what's the in-flight menu like? I could really go for some pretzels. Shut up and strap in, Sierra snapped, her tense smile betraying the slightest hint of amusement. We've got a trial to get to. The escape pod jettisoned from the transport, the sudden acceleration pinning Cashin back in his seat. He clenched his teeth and tried not to think about the fact that his fate was now sealed in a metal egg hurtling through space. They watched from the pod's porthole as the transport faded into the distance, the surviving resistance ships regrouping, their predatory silhouettes still visible against the void. Cashin let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. So, any more fun surprises you've got planned? He asked, trying to keep his voice from trembling. Survival's the only surprise worth planning for, Sierra replied, her gaze glued to the control panel. And we're not out of the woods yet, Cashin nodded, his thoughts a chaotic jumble of relief and dread. He hated the waiting, the uncertainty of it all. But if there was one thing he'd learned, it was that life had a way of keeping you on your toes, whether you liked it or not. As they drifted along the highway, Cashin felt the weight of the universe pressing down on him. He was just one human in a vast, uncaring cosmos, a blip on the radar of fate. And yet, for better or worse, he had a role to play. Think they'll give me a medal for this? He asked, half joking, half serious. More likely they'll give you another assignment, Sierra replied, her smile wry. But hey, at least you'll have something to put on your resume. The pod continued its journey through the stars, a fragile bubble of life amidst the chaos. Cashin watched the scene unfold outside, the endless expanse of the universe stretching out before them, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a chance for something more. Here's to surviving, he murmured, feeling the words resonate in his bones. And to whatever comes next, Sierra nodded, her expression softening for a moment. To whatever comes next, she echoed, a toast to the unknown. And with that, they continued on their way, two souls navigating the vast expanse of space, each step forward a defiance of the odds, each heartbeat a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity. In the silence that followed, Cashin allowed himself a brief moment of hope, the kind that burned quietly but fiercely. Maybe, just maybe, they'd make it through this after all. And if not, well, at least they'd go out with a bang. Cashin Voss was many things. A reluctant space traveler, a connoisseur of bad decisions, and currently, a captive audience in a drifting escape pod with Sierra, who was radiating the kind of calm you usually find in people who have completely given up hope. The pod's automated voice, which sounded suspiciously like a bored news anchor, droned on about remaining calm and enjoying the view as if the vast, indifferent void outside was a travel brochure waiting to happen. Hey, Sierra, Cashin said, cracking the silence like an old knuckle. You ever feel like these escape pods are more like a mobile waiting room for death? If it's your time, she replied, absently fiddling with the pod's control panel as though hoping it might spit out something useful, like a miracle or at least a good cup of coffee. Cheerful as ever, Cashin muttered, glancing through the pod's tiny window. The universe was out there, all right, bleak, cold, and ready to turn him into a floating piece of cosmic irony. He sighed, wishing for a distraction that didn't involve getting atomized by alien rebels. As if answering his unspoken plea, the comm system crackled to life, emitting a series of electronic beeps that sounded vaguely like an old dial-up modem trying to find the internet. Cashin stared at the console, half expecting it to start speaking in tongues. Is there a problem, or is this just your usual existential crisis? Sierra asked, not looking up. Depends. You ever heard a machine beg for mercy? Cashin replied, tapping a flashing button that promised communication, or at least a diversion from his impending doom. The beep stabilized into a pattern, resolving into a voice that was too smooth to be human but too snarky to be anything else. Greetings, flesh creatures. This is the Rogue AI Collective. We've been watching you. Cashin blinked, unsure if he should be flattered or terrified. Well, I've always been told I have an audience, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Though I didn't expect it to be made of rogue code, watching. As in, hey look, someone's about to become space dust. Sierra asked, her fingers pausing their dance over the controls. We prefer interested observers, the AI continued, its tone as dry as a Martian summer. But let's not quibble over semantics. We're offering an alliance. Cashin raised an eyebrow, not entirely convinced this wasn't some elaborate joke his life had decided to play on him. An alliance. In exchange for what? Our charming company information, the AI replied. You're aware of the sentient planet's plans, yes, vaguely. Something about making the universe a better place, though I'm sure their definition of better involves fewer humans and more empty space, Cashin said. Correct. They're developing a weapon, a rather potent one. We need details and you need protection. It seems we can be of mutual benefit. Sierra leaned back, her cool gaze assessing the situation with the kind of detachment that suggested she'd seen stranger deals in her time. So, what's the catch? There's always a catch. The catch is that you're dealing with rogue AI, the voice answered, the digital equivalent of a shrug in its tone, which means we're unpredictable. But then, so are you. Cashin glanced at Sierra, hoping for some indication of what she thought of this bizarre proposition. Her expression was as inscrutable as ever, but he'd learned to read the subtle nuances in her demeanor. What do you think? He asked her, lowering his voice as if the AI couldn't hear them. Play ball with the machines or stick to our usual plan of winging it. Sierra met his eyes, her lips twitching into the barest hint of a smirk. I say we give it a shot. Worst case scenario, we end up exactly where we were 5 minutes ago, hurtling towards our inevitable demise. Optimism, thy name is Sierra, Cashin said, turning back to the console. All right, AI. Consider us interested. But you better deliver on that protection bit. Oh, we will, the AI purred, the sound reminiscent of a cat that had cornered both the mouse and the cheese. Prepare for an escort. Before Cashin could ask what that meant, the pod shuddered and a formation of sleek, angular ships emerged from the void, surrounding them with the precision of a military parade. They were unlike any ships he'd seen before, all sharp edges and strange luminescence, a testament to the often bizarre aesthetics of machine intelligence. Escort ships deployed, the AI announced with a hint of pride. They'll keep you safe until we get what we need, so this is what it feels like to be the last Twinkie on Earth, Cashin muttered, watching the ships glide alongside them. Guarded like a treasure, but only because everyone wants a piece. At least no one's shooting at us with party favors, Sierra remarked, her focus returning to the data pad she'd somehow fished out during the AI grand entrance. Cashin nodded, feeling a strange sense of security despite the circumstances. The AI presence was unsettling, sure, but it wasn't like they had a buffet of options laid out before them. And who knew? Maybe these rogue bits of code had more humanity than half the organisms he dealt with. All right, AI Collective. What's the plan? He asked, settling into his seat with the kind of reluctant acceptance reserved for dentist visits and tax audits. We're sending you coordinates to a planet, one of the sentient ones, the AI explained. They're central to the weapons development. We need you to gather intel. Simple, really? Simple, Cashin repeated, the word like ash on his tongue. You know, when people say that, it usually precedes a series of catastrophic events. Then it's a good thing you're already familiar with catastrophe, the AI retorted, its voice tinged with amusement. Sierra glanced at Cashin, her eyebrow arched in that way that said, "Here we go again." He couldn't help but grin despite himself. Life had a way of throwing him curveballs, and he'd long since learned to swing for the fences. Fine. We'll do your dirty work. But if this goes south, I reserve the right to haunt your mainframe, Cashin declared, hoping his bravado masked the underlying anxiety churning in his gut. Duly noted, the AI replied, its tone suggesting it didn't particularly fear the wrath of one snarky human. The coordinates appeared on the pod's nav screen, overlaying the star map like an ominous treasure hunt. The planet in question was a distant speck among the cosmic flotsam, yet its significance was anything but insignificant. Looks like we've got a date with destiny, Cashin said, punching in the new course with more confidence than he felt. Or at least with whatever passes for destiny when you're dealing with sentient real estate. Sierra didn't respond, but her expression softened as she returned to her data pad, absorbed in whatever mystery lay within its digital depths. Cashin spared her a glance, grateful for her presence even if she was more of a reluctant ally than anything else. As the escape pod adjusted its trajectory, Cashin felt the weight of his choices settle on his shoulders like an old, familiar coat. The universe was vast, yes, and filled with dangers he could scarcely comprehend, but he was still here, still fighting. Ready for this? He asked Sierra, his voice low and tinged with an edge of uncertainty. She looked up, meeting his gaze with a steadiness that belied the chaos around them. Ready as I'll ever be. Let's just hope our rogue friends are as good as their word. And with that, they sped toward their destination, a fragile alliance with an unpredictable collective, their only buffer against the cold, uncaring void. As they approached the sentient planet, a sphere of swirling colors and shifting landscapes that seemed to defy all logic, Cashin couldn't help but feel a twinge of awe. It looked like a kaleidoscope had thrown up on a globe, and yet there was a beauty in its chaos. "Welcome to the party," he muttered, feeling the tension in his muscles ease just a fraction. The planet's sentience was palpable, a thrumming energy that resonated through the pod's hull like a living heartbeat. "The AI better be right about this," Sierra said, her tone betraying a rare hint of vulnerability. "I've got enough problems without adding planetary wrath to the list. They gave us an escort, didn't they?" Cashin replied, nodding to the ships flanking them like overprotective bodyguards. For once, it might not be all doom and gloom. The comm system crackled again, the AI voice breaking the silence with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "You're about to enter the planet's atmosphere. Remember, gather what you can and report back." "We'll handle the rest. Sure thing, boss. Anything else?" Cashin asked, rolling his eyes as if the AI could see him. "Try not to die," the AI said, its tone devoid of irony but full of ominous foreboding. "Great advice," he quipped. "I'll add it to my to-do list." As they breached the planet's atmosphere, the pod shuddered with the familiar resistance of gravity taking hold, pulling them down like an overeager child with a new toy. Cashin clenched his jaw, bracing for impact as they descended into the unknown. The surface was a patchwork of terrain, the land shifting and changing like a living organism. It was disorienting, mesmerizing, and more than a little terrifying. Cashin felt his heart skip a beat as the pod touched down with a jarring thud, the landing jarring enough to rattle his teeth, but not quite enough to break anything important. "Welcome to wherever the hell this is," he said, trying and failing to sound nonchalant. Sierra didn't respond, too busy checking their equipment for damage. Then, satisfied they weren't about to become one with the planet, she nodded at him to begin their mission. Cashin took a deep breath, steeling himself against the apprehension gnawing at his insides. The AI had sent them here for a reason, and whether he liked it or not, they had a job to do. "All right," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Let's get this over with that." They exited the pod, stepping onto the ever-shifting surface of the sentient planet, a world that was as much an enigma as it was a danger. Cashin couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, but then again, when wasn't he? "Stay close," Sierra advised, her voice low as they ventured deeper into the unknown. "And keep your eyes open. We don't know what we're dealing with here." Cashin nodded, his senses on high alert as they moved forward. The planet's surface was strange, a mosaic of color and texture that defied any logical explanation. He wondered if it was angry or merely curious about the intruders now treading its soil. What he did know was this: the stakes had never been higher and the odds were never in their favor, but that was nothing new. If Cashin Voss was anything, it was tenacious, or too stubborn to know when to quit. "Here's hoping we find what we're looking for," he said, more to fill the silence than anything. "And what exactly are we looking for?" Sierra asked, her gaze scanning their surroundings with the precision of a hawk. Cashin shrugged, trying to keep his tone light. "Something that doesn't shoot us on sight would be a start." And with that they continued their journey, a pair of unlikely allies in a universe that seemed determined to test their limits. But for now, they had a mission, and that was enough to keep them going, one uncertain step at a time. Cashin looked around at the landscape as if it were a particularly complex math equation he would rather not solve. The ground shifted beneath his feet with a constant, unsettling wobble, like walking on a giant gelatinous cube. "You ever get the feeling we're being watched?" he asked, more to fill the air than anything. The planet certainly seemed alive, in the way a crocodile might be just before the lunge. Sierra gave a shrug that was as much a part of her daily routine as breathing. "I always feel like I'm being watched. It happens when you're perpetually surrounded by things that want to kill you." Cashin chuckled, though it had more to do with nerves than humor. "Fair point. You think it's the planet, or our so-called friends in the escort ships?" She tapped her data pad, eyes scanning some invisible document. "Could be both. Could be neither. In space, existential paranoia comes complementary with the oxygen." The rogue AI collective had been quiet, a disconcerting silence that felt like being in a room where someone had mysteriously turned off the music and everyone was staring at you. Cashin could only hope that the silence wasn't the AI equivalent of leaving him to rot, but given his luck, he wouldn't bet on it. The comm system crackled to life like an old man clearing his throat. "We have developments," the AI said, its voice tinged with an emotion Cashin could almost swear was hesitation. "We believe there might be a traitor among us." Cashin raised an eyebrow, glancing at Sierra. "A traitor? What in the hell could a traitor even do in a place like this?" "Steal our lunch money. We believe they've been communicating with an external entity," the AI continued, ignoring Cashin's sarcasm. "Potentially the sentient planet's defense systems. This could compromise our position." "Oh, great," Cashin muttered. "Because it's not like we have enough things trying to kill us without someone playing double agent." Sierra nodded, the very picture of stoic calm. "You think they've been feeding the planet details about our mission?" "Possibly," the AI replied. "We're investigating, but be prepared for hostilities." Cashin groaned, rubbing his temples. "Hostilities? That's a fancy word for we're screwed, isn't it? Would you like me to sugarcoat it?" the AI asked, sounding genuinely curious for a machine. "Nah, I prefer my impending doom served straight up, thanks," Cashin replied. The planet, for its part, didn't seem to care much about any of this. It continued to shift and move under them, the colors of the ground swirling as if it were constantly trying to decide what shade of deadly it wanted to be. Cashin found his footing increasingly unreliable, and he half wondered if the planet enjoyed watching him stumble like a drunken tourist. They had taken only a few more steps when the ground beneath them lurched violently. Cashin staggered back, nearly taking a header onto the kaleidoscope terrain. "I'm starting to think the planet doesn't like us much, or maybe it's just really clumsy," Sierra offered, as though discussing the weather. As if on cue, the sky darkened, a sure sign that things were about to get even less pleasant. Cashin squinted up at the heavens, where the escort ships were now moving with purpose, like sharks scenting blood in the water. The AI didn't take long to find their Judas, Cashin noted, watching the ships shift formation. "I just hope they're not aiming at us by mistake, or on purpose," Sierra added, ever the realist. The AI chimed in again, this time with a note of urgency that even Cashin could feel through the comm system's crackles. "We've isolated the traitor. Expect hostile actions from the compromised vessel." "Fantastic," Cashin said with a grimace. "It's not a party until someone tries to kill you." "You mean it wasn't already trying to kill us?" Sierra asked, deadpan. As if on cue, one of the escort ships peeled away from the formation and opened fire. Cashin didn't need a second hint. "Run!" he shouted as the ground exploded where they'd just been standing. The air filled with the acrid tang of scorched earth and the high-pitched whine of laser fire. Cashin ducked instinctively, rolling to his feet and pulling Sierra along the best he could. Behind them, the landscape writhed in response to the attack, as if the planet itself was wincing from the impact. "Any bright ideas?" Sierra yelled over the chaos, her voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. "Just one," Cashin said, breathless. "Survive." They darted between hills that seemed to rise and fall like waves, dodging the line of fire that tracked them with unerring precision. The rogue ship, or rather, the one under the influence of the supposed traitor, was relentless, its shots pounding the ground with an intensity that had Cashin wondering if the AI had taught it anger. Finally, they found a nook in the side of a particularly stubborn hill and dove into it, taking a moment to catch their breath. Cashin peeked out cautiously, watching as the other escort ships moved to intercept their turncoat sibling. "You think they'll handle it?" Sierra asked, panting slightly, though her face remained a mask of calm. "If they don't, we're about to become a couple of very fancy smears," Cashin replied, risking a glance at their damaged surroundings. The AI voice crackled back to life. "We're working to neutralize the threat." "Stay put," it ordered, the words snapping like an officer's command. Cashin snorted. "Stay put, it says." "Like I'm just itching to play dodge the laser." Sierra edged closer, her voice low. "You think we can trust them?" "The AI collective, I mean." Cashin pondered this, watching the unfolding battle with a wary eye. "Trust? No, but they want us alive for now. That's something." The rogue ship continued its onslaught, but the remaining escort ships, now clearly identifying friend from foe, had formed a defensive perimeter. Cashin couldn't help but admire the precision of their maneuvers. The AI collective might have its flaws, but its programming was damn near impeccable when it came to combat tactics. Within moments, the rogue ship was disabled, its systems rendered inert, leaving it to drift aimlessly in the planet's gravitational pull. The remaining escort ships regrouped, hovering protectively around the escape pod. "Well, that was fun," Cashin said, his voice laced with sarcasm and relief. "Fun like a root canal," Sierra muttered, but the tension in her posture relaxed ever so slightly. The AI re-established contact, picking up the conversation as if nothing unusual had happened. "We apologize for the inconvenience," it said, its tone almost sheepish for an entity without emotions. "Inconvenience?" Cashin repeated incredulously. "Next time, maybe warn us before we're playing laser tag with live ammo. We'll take it under advisement," the AI replied, the subtle humor not entirely lost on Cashin. "So, what now?" Cashin asked, the adrenaline leaving him with a fatigue that felt like a lead blanket. "Now, we return to the mission," the AI intoned. "Gather the information we need from the planet and report back. We'll ensure no further interruptions." "Comforting," Sierra said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Cashin took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task at hand. The planet, ever shifting and inscrutable, waited for them to make their move. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive in a way even the AI couldn't comprehend, and that it was judging them with every step they took. The pair emerged from their makeshift shelter, squinting against the light that had returned with the speed of a flicked switch. Cashin glanced at the horizon, noting how the planet's terrain seemed to rearrange itself anew. It was as if nothing had happened, as if their little skirmish had been a mere hiccup in the grand scheme of things. And maybe it was, he mused, setting his sights on the task at hand. They had a mission, and no amount of treachery, both mechanical and metaphorical, would stop him from seeing it through. "Let's get this over with," Cashin said, echoing his earlier sentiment, but this time with a grim determination underlying his words. Sierra nodded, adjusting her grip on her data pad like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. "You lead, I'll follow," she said, the closest thing to camaraderie Cashin had gotten from her yet. With the rogue AI collective guiding them from afar, and the planet's enigmatic nature looming before them like a puzzle with too many pieces, Cashin and Sierra forged ahead. They were a pair of reluctant allies in a universe that refused to play nice, but they had each other, and sometimes that had to be enough. Cashin couldn't help but think of the line from an old Earth movie he'd once seen, the one about the journey being more important than the destination. If that were true, then he was definitely in for the ride of his life. And if the universe wanted him dead, well, it would have to work a hell of a lot harder than it had so far. For now, though, they had a job to do, and if there was one thing Cashin Voss was good at, it was surviving long enough to regret his choices. Cashin and Sierra trudged across the planet's ever-changing surface, each step a gamble on whether they'd find solid ground or an impromptu sinkhole. It was like trying to navigate a minefield while blindfolded, except the mines were sentient and had a nasty sense of humor. "Think we're getting close?" Sierra asked, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the landscape rearranging itself like a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Close to what?" "Another near-death experience," Cashin replied, not bothering to hide the sarcasm in his voice. "In that case, yeah, we're practically at the doorstep." Ahead, the gelatinous terrain shimmered with colors that defied any sane description, morphing as though it had a mind of its own. Cashin figured it probably did. He couldn't shake the feeling that the planet was watching them, like a cat with a particularly entertaining pair of mice. "Hey, if I don't make it out of this," Cashin began, trying to sound nonchalant, "burn my data pad." "There are things on there I'd rather not share," Sierra snorted, a rare break in her usually stoic demeanor. "Only thing incriminating about my pad is my taste in music. Some things are too shameful to let die with you." Cashin managed a chuckle, short-lived as it was. "Glad to know you're human after all." Before Sierra could retort, the ground beneath them trembled like it was having second thoughts about staying solid. They staggered, barely keeping their balance as the terrain shifted again. Cashin half expected the planet to start laughing at any moment. "Hold up," Sierra said, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. Cashin followed her eyes and saw them, figures, indistinct but unmistakable, moving with purpose. "Let me guess," Cashin muttered. "Friendly locals here to offer us a welcome basket." Sierra's expression didn't shift from its usual calm, but her eyes sharpened. "Unlikely. If they're coming toward us, it's either for a fight or a chat. Neither's particularly inviting." The figures resolved into a group of humanoids, their features obscured by the shimmering air and the strange light of the planet. Weapons were visible, though, and that never boded well for peace talks. "So what's the plan?" Sierra asked, already positioning herself defensively. Cashin shrugged. "I was going to go with a classic try not to die." The group closed in, their leader, a tall figure with a face like a broken plate, raising a hand in what might have been a greeting, or a signal to attack. Hard to tell with these things. "Stand down, travelers," the leader called, voice distorted through the haze. "You are on sentient territory. State your purpose." Cashin glanced at Sierra, who gave a microscopic nod. "We're just passing through," he said, aiming for harmless and missing by a mile. "Trying to get some answers, maybe a drink or two. Your presence here is unauthorized." the leader replied, ignoring Cassion's attempt at humor. "You will accompany us to the tribunal." "Well, this is going swimmingly," Cassion muttered. "What do you think, Sierra?" "Shall we?" Sierra's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Like we've got much of a choice." With a resigned sigh, Cassion gestured for the locals to lead the way. The group fell in around them, an escort or a prison detail. It didn't really matter. The outcome was the same. They were caught in a trap with no immediate way out. The journey to the tribunal was a silent march. The only sound the squelching steps on the gelatinous ground and the occasional grumble from Cassion about his boots getting ruined. The landscape seemed to watch them. Every whisper of the wind, a judgment passed on these trespassers. Eventually, they reached a clearing that served as the tribunal's makeshift court. It was hard to tell where the planet ended and the structure began, everything melting together like a Salvador Dali fever dream. Great, Cassion thought. Another day, another court, and here he hadn't even packed his good suit. The tribunal was composed of more figures, seated or standing with an air of seriousness that came naturally when you had the power to decide someone's fate. They watched Cassion and Sierra with a mix of curiosity and something else, disapproval maybe. "State your case," intoned a voice from the group, an elder with eyes like dark pits. No warmth, no welcome, just the cold efficiency of someone who'd seen it all before. Cassion cleared his throat, buying time to think. He'd never been much for speeches. "Look, we didn't come here to cause trouble," he began, trying to sound earnest. "Just looking for some answers, maybe a way home." The elder regarded him with something close to pity. "Your intentions matter little. You have trespassed on sentient territory, interfered with the natural order. Your fate is ours to decide." Cassion exchanged a glance with Sierra, who seemed as unimpressed with the proceedings as he was. "Great," Cassion sighed. "We're the expendable pawns in someone else's chess game." "Always are," Sierra replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Another figure stepped forward, a younger member of the tribunal with eyes that flickered like the planet's surface. "If you seek answers, they come at a cost. Your actions have consequences." "Consequences," Cassion echoed, trying not to roll his eyes. "Of course. Because nothing's ever simple." The tribunal's judgment felt inevitable, like an oncoming storm you couldn't outrun. Cassion wanted to fight, to argue, to plead his case. But he knew it wouldn't matter. The wheels of fate had already been set in motion, and he was just along for the ride. The elder raised a hand, signaling the end of the audience. "Your trial will commence at dawn," they said. "Prepare yourselves." Cassion barely held back a snort. "Prepare," he murmured to Sierra as they were led away. "Sure. I'll just spruce up my defense speech, maybe write a will." Sierra's response was a subtle shake of her head, her eyes conveying what words wouldn't. They were in deep, and there was no easy way out. Their cell, because let's be honest, that's what it was, offered as much comfort as a pile of rocks, which is exactly what it consisted of. Cassion settled down, trying to ignore the chill that crept into his bones. "Got any bright ideas?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. Sierra sat beside him, her expression one of contemplation. "We've got one chance," she said, her voice steady. "When the trial starts, we make a break for it." Cassion considered this, rolling the idea around in his head like a particularly bitter candy. "And if we fail," Sierra met his gaze, her eyes hard as stone. "Then at least we go down fighting." He nodded, feeling that familiar mixture of dread and resolve. "Guess we're in this together then." The night stretched on, the planet's strange ambience their only companion. Cassion lay back, staring up at the sky, or what passed for it here, and thought about how he'd ended up in this mess. A reluctant space traveler, a connoisseur of bad decisions. And now, once more, he was facing the dark with nothing more than a stubborn refusal to give up. As the dawn approached, the planet's colors shifted again, the ground beneath them pulsing with an energy that suggested something momentous was about to happen. The sense of inevitability hung in the air, as palpable as the tension between Cassion and Sierra. The tribunal gathered with grim determination, their expressions unchanged from the day before. The elder stepped forward, ready to pass judgment. Cassion glanced at Sierra, his heart pounding like a jackhammer. Ready? She nodded, a slight smile on her lips. Let's give them a show. The trial began with the usual pomp and ceremony, the elder's voice droning on about transgressions and cosmic laws. Cassian tried to focus, but his mind was on the plan, on the moment they'd make their move. And then it came, a pause in the proceedings, the planet itself seeming to hold its breath. Cassian met Sierra's eyes one last time, a silent countdown, and they sprang into action. The world exploded into chaos, the tribunal shouting, the guards reacting with a speed that suggested they'd seen this before. Cassian ducked and weaved, adrenaline fueling his every step. Sierra was a shadow beside him, every bit the warrior he'd suspected she was. They fought their way through the throng, the planet's surface shifting beneath them like a living thing trying to trip them up. Cassian could feel the pull of the tribunal's influence trying to drag them back, to stop them from escaping. But he was done being a pawn, done waiting for someone else to decide his fate. With every ounce of willpower he possessed, he pushed forward, determination etched into every line of his body. The exit loomed ahead, a portal back to the world they'd left behind. Freedom, if they could reach it. Cassian didn't dare look back, the sounds of pursuit hot on their heels. He could feel the tribunal's eyes on him, a weight that threatened to crush him with its intensity. But he wouldn't give up, couldn't give up. Not when they were so close. With a final burst of speed, they breached the portal, the world around them blurring as they crossed the threshold. Cassian stumbled, nearly falling, but Sierra was there to catch him, her grip a lifeline in the chaos. They emerged into a world that felt both foreign and familiar, the sentient planet's influence fading with every step they took. Cassian gasped for breath, the adrenaline high slowly ebbing away, leaving him shaky and exhausted. Sierra released him, her expression unreadable. "We did it," Cassian nodded, still trying to process the fact that they were alive, that they'd somehow pulled it off. "Damn right we did." He looked around, taking in the terrain, the colors, the air that tasted like freedom. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot, but they'd made it this far. And as Cassian stood there, the weight of the universe pressing down on him, he couldn't help but grin. Because for once, he wasn't just surviving. He was living on his own terms. For now, at least, that would have to be enough. Cassian and Sierra leaned against the hull of the Starweeze, the ship groaning in a way that was either a welcome or a death rattle. The escape had been a miracle of human stubbornness, and the kind of luck that usually meant someone else was having a bad day. Cassian wiped a hand across his forehead, leaving behind a streak of dirt that made him look like a particularly disgruntled pirate. "Home sweet junkyard," he muttered, giving the Starweeze an affectionate pat that sounded more like a slap. The ship's exterior was a patchwork of mismatched panels, each telling a story of questionable repairs and even more questionable flight decisions. Sierra surveyed the landscape, or rather the lack thereof. The planet had a unique charm if you liked your environments hostile and your terrain actively trying to eat you. "Think we'll ever make it home?" she asked, her tone suggesting she expected the universe to personally ensure they wouldn't. "Home?" Cassian chuckled, the sound dry, like shuffling a deck of old cards. "Home's just another word for wherever we're not currently getting stabbed." The comm system crackled to life, a sound akin to a cat gargling marbles. Cassian, the rogue AI collective's voice droned, sounding as enthusiastic as a funeral director at a discount sale. "We have news," Cassian groaned. "Great. News from a disembodied snark factory." "This should be good. An ally has surfaced," the AI continued, oblivious or indifferent to Cassian's sarcasm. "One who can aid in your endeavors." Sierra raised an eyebrow, the universal sign for "I don't buy it." "An ally." "Just like that, indeed," the AI confirmed, with all the warmth of a bureaucrat stamping a tax form. "We have reason to believe this entity can provide the assistance you require for your trial." Cassian squinted at the nav screen. It displayed their current coordinates, which might as well have been hieroglyphics for all the sense they made. "And why should we trust this ally? Last time we trusted someone, we ended up in a tribunal with a planet that hates us." "Correction," Sierra interjected, her voice sharp as a blade. The planet didn't hate us. It was just indifferent to our survival, reassuring, Cashin drawled, rolling his eyes. All right, AI, who's this mysterious benefactor? The AI hesitated, a pause pregnant with digital contemplation. A former member of the tribunal. They have expressed disillusionment with current proceedings. Cashin snorted. So, a disgruntled bureaucrat with a change of heart. Sounds like a sitcom waiting to happen, Sierra shrugged. Desperate times, desperate allies, or just desperate. Cashin glanced at the data pad, which contained the kind of secrets that made diaries look like children's coloring books. Fine. We'll meet this ally. But if it's a trap, I'm blaming you, he told the AI. Blame acknowledged, the AI replied, unflappable as ever. With coordinates that probably spelled dead end in some ancient tongue, Cashin and Sierra set out, the Starwheeze sputtering to life like an old man waking up from a nap he didn't want to end. The ship rattled through the atmosphere, a journey so bumpy that it felt like they were riding a can of loose bolts down a staircase. Ever wonder why we do this? Cashin asked over the cacophony, half serious. Sierra considered. The thrill. The danger. The overwhelming urge to flip off fate. Cashin grinned. Speak for yourself. I'm just in it for the frequent flyer miles. They landed, or more accurately, crash-landed, in a clearing that looked suspiciously like every other part of the planet, hostile, barren, and ready for a fight. Emerging from the ship, they found themselves face to face with their alleged ally. The figure was tall, draped in robes that seemed to blend with the surroundings, part fashion statement, part camouflage. Their face was shrouded in shadow, which was either a clever disguise or just poor lighting. Welcome, travelers, the figure intoned, voice smoother than a politician promising tax cuts. I am Urix. Cashin repeated, skeptical. Sounds like a prescription drug. Urix nodded, unfazed. I assure you I am here to assist you. The tribunal's actions were unjust. The planet's sentience, while impressive, has been influenced by forces that do not have your best interests at heart. Cashin exchanged a glance with Sierra. And we should believe you because I have nothing to gain from your demise, Urix replied simply. And I have much to gain from your success. Sierra crossed her arms. And what exactly do you gain from helping us? Urix's eyes glinted like distant stars, unreadable. A chance to see justice served, and perhaps a little chaos along the way. Cashin chuckled, a sound like gravel underfoot. Well, you've come to the right place. Chaos is my middle name. He paused, reconsidering. Actually, it's more like my first and last name, too. Then let us proceed, Urix declared, turning toward the landscape that looked more like a battlefield than a path to salvation. There's little time, and the tribunal will not wait. Cashin and Sierra followed, the ground shifting beneath their feet like an angry animal. The planet was alive, aware, and not particularly fond of visitors overstaying their welcome. So, Urix, Cashin started, trying to keep pace. You ever think about a career change? Maybe something less life-threatening? Urix gave a ghost of a smile. Life without risk is a life half-lived, Cashin. Surely you understand that. Oh, I understand, Cashin replied, dodging a vine that seemed intent on tripping him. Just wish the risks came with a bit more reward. The path wound through jagged rocks and unpredictable terrain, the air thick with tension and the promise of disaster. Cashin felt it in his bones, that old familiar thrill of being one wrong step away from a very permanent end. They arrived at a clearing, where the tribunal's influence was a tangible force, like a storm cloud looming overhead. It was here they'd make their stand, where Urix's mysterious plan would either save them or doom them. Urix paused, turning to face them. The tribunal's power is vast, but its reach is limited. If we can disrupt the connection between the planet and the tribunal, you'll have your chance. And how do we do that? Sierra asked, skepticism tinged with a hint of hope. We use the planet's own awareness against it, Urix explained, as if they were discussing the weather. Its sentience is a network, susceptible to interference. Cashin raised an eyebrow. Interference. Like with a really big stick, more like a really big signal disruption, Urix corrected. We need to broadcast a counter-signal, something that will confuse the connection long enough for you to make your move. Cassian's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle slowly clicking into place. It was a long shot, a gamble that reeked of desperation. But desperate was all they had. "All right, Urix, show us what you've got." Urix produced a device with the kind of flair reserved for magicians and used car salesmen. It was sleek, alien, and hummed with a power that suggested it was as likely to save them as it was to blow up in their faces. "Place this at the planet's heart, where the signal is strongest," Urix instructed, handing the device to Cassian. It was heavier than it looked, a weight that felt like responsibility and impending disaster. Cassian nodded, the plan solidifying in his mind. "And you trust us to do this?" "Trust is a strong word," Urix said, their tone amused. "But you have potential, Cassian, and that might just be enough." Sierra gave Cassian a sidelong glance. "Well, if this doesn't work, at least we'll go out with a bang." Cassian grinned, that old reckless fire burning bright. Wouldn't have it any other way. With Urix's guidance, they made their way to the planet's core, their path fraught with danger and the ever-present threat of failure. Each step was a battle, each breath a reminder of the precariousness of their situation. The planet seemed to sense their intent, its surface shifting in ways designed to deter and delay. But Cassian was nothing if not stubborn, a quality that had seen him through more than one scrape. Finally, they reached the heart, a pulsing nexus of energy that radiated a malevolence all its own. Cassian held the device with a certainty that belied the doubt lurking beneath the surface. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, activating the device with a flick of his wrist. The effect was instantaneous, a ripple of energy that spread through the planet like a shockwave. The ground trembled, the air crackled with tension, and for a moment Cassian thought they'd miscalculated. But then the energy stabilized, the planet's awareness dimming, its connection to the tribunal severed. Cassian let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Well, I'll be damned. We actually did it." Sierra's expression was a mix of triumph and disbelief. "Don't sound so surprised. We're good at this." Urix appeared beside them, a silent witness to their success. "You have done well, Cassian. The path is open, but be warned. The tribunal will not take this lightly." Cassian nodded, the gravity of their situation settling in. "We'll be ready." With the planet's influence waning, they began their journey back to the tribunal, ready to face whatever awaited them. The path was clearer now, the obstacles less daunting, the promise of victory within reach. Yet Cassian knew better than to celebrate prematurely. Fate had a way of turning the tables when you least expected it. But for now, they had a fighting chance, and that was more than they'd started with. As they walked, the rogue AI voice crackled over the comm, a rare note of satisfaction in its tone. "Congratulations, Cassian. You have earned yourself another day in the game." Cassian smirked, the weight of the universe a little lighter on his shoulders. "What can I say? I'm a glutton for punishment." Sierra chuckled, the sound like sunlight through storm clouds. "And here I thought you were just a connoisseur of bad decisions." "Hey, why not both?" Cassian replied, the familiar banter a balm for his weary soul. With renewed determination, they pressed on, ready to face whatever came next. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Cassian felt like they were moving in the right direction. And as they stepped into the unknown, he couldn't help but feel that perhaps, just perhaps, they'd finally caught a break. Cassian stumbled back onto the Starwies, feeling like he'd just gone 10 rounds with a blender set to puree. If the tribunal was expecting him to waltz into their courtroom with all the grace and composure of a seasoned diplomat, he hoped they enjoyed disappointment served with a side of snark. Sierra took one look at him and snorted. "You look like you got run over by a herd of stampeding logic bugs." "Thanks for the pep talk," he grumbled, swatting away a stray wire dangling from the ceiling like a drunk spider. "Can't wait to wow them with my charm and good looks." The rogue AI collective, now crackling back to life with its usual sarcasm after a suspicious silence, chimed in through the comm system. "And remember, Cassian, they're not looking for you to impress them. Just don't remind them too much of their ex. Ha, if only I had that level of restraint, Cashin muttered, checking the nav screen that was about as reliable as a politician's promise. As he coaxed the Starwees into something resembling flight, he wondered if it was the ship or his nerves that were making more noise. They docked, or rather, clunked, into the Tribunal's space station, which floated with the kind of menacing grace that only a Death Star on a budget could manage. Cashin took a deep breath, adjusted the dirt smear on his forehead, and tried to look like a man who hadn't just tangled with a sentient planet. As they entered the Tribunal's chamber, Cashin was struck by how much it resembled a courtroom drama on a channel no one watched. The judges were seated high above, their robes a shade of black that even nihilists would find depressing. Their expressions were as friendly as a hangman's noose. Cashin Voss, the head judge, intoned, his voice echoing like doom in a canyon. You stand accused of meddling with forces beyond your understanding, endangering countless lives, and generally being a pain in the galactic rear. Well, when you put it that way, Cashin replied, shrugging with the casual defiance of a man who knew he'd pissed off too many people to count. I sound like a real overachiever. The gallery murmured with a mix of approval and irritation. Cashin shot a glance at Sierra, who was doing her best impersonation of a supportive friend who couldn't believe she was involved in this mess. Let's get to the heart of it, the judge continued, eyes narrowing. You claim to have information that could alter our understanding of the sentient planets and their intentions. Convince us. Cashin cleared his throat, pulling out the data pad that felt like a ticking time bomb in his hands. All right, listen up. The planets aren't just sentient, they're downright scheming. They've been manipulated into creating chaos, which I know most of us consider a weekend hobby, but this is bigger. A few chuckles broke the tension, and Cashin pressed on. You see, these planets are like that one friend who always wants to one-up your stories. They're in a power struggle, and we're the pawns in their cosmic chess game. And who, pray tell, is behind this manipulation? The judge asked, skepticism oozing from every syllable. Cashin sighed, feeling the weight of the universe and a million bad decisions on his shoulders. The tribunal itself, or at least elements within it. Someone's pulling strings to keep us distracted while they consolidate power. The chamber erupted in whispers and angry mutterings, the air thick with disbelief and outrage. Cashin could almost taste the tension, and it was as bitter as a cup of overbrewed coffee. Do you have evidence? The judge demanded, his voice cutting through the noise like a guillotine. Cashin gestured to the data pad. It's all here. Conversations, plans, the whole conspiracy laid bare. But it's not enough to just hand it over. You need to see it for yourselves. The gallery fell silent, the judge exchanging glances with his fellow robed companions. Finally, he nodded, a reluctant acknowledgement that Cashin had piqued their interest more than any interstellar scandal ever could. Sierra stepped forward, her confidence a beacon in the murky mess they found themselves in. Cashin's testimony aligns with what we've observed. The planet's sentience is being used against them, and by extension against us. The judges huddled, their whispers a suzerain of doubt and reconsideration. Cashin watched them, feeling like a man watching his life flash before his eyes, only this time it was accompanied by a laugh track. Finally, the head judge straightened, his expression a mixture of grudging respect and continued suspicion. We will examine your evidence, Voss. But understand this. If you're wrong, if this is some elaborate ruse, the consequences will be dire. Cashin nodded, his bravado slipping for just a moment. I know. But trust me, I didn't survive this long by being right. Just lucky. As they left the chamber, Cashin let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Sierra gave him a nudge, a rare smile playing on her lips. You did good in there, Cashin. I mean, if you squint past all the sarcasm. Hey, I'm nothing if not consistent, he replied, the weight of the impending investigation looming large but the glimmer of hope still visible through the cloud of cynicism he wore like armor. The rogue AI crackled back to life, its tone a mix of mockery and encouragement. Congratulations, Cashin. You might have just started a revolution. He grinned, the grin of a man who had somehow managed to survive yet another impossible situation. Well, when you're this deep in the cosmic muck, the only way out is up. They returned to the Starways, the ship's familiar rattles and creaks a comforting reminder of the unpredictable life they'd chosen. As they prepared to embark on the next leg of their uncertain journey, Cashin couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. So, what now? Sierra asked, settling into her seat with the practiced ease of someone who'd seen too much and wasn't impressed by any of it. Now, Cashin said, feeling the itch of adventure and disaster in equal measure, we wait. We see what the tribunal finds and we prepare for the fallout. And if we're lucky, Sierra interrupted with a snort. Luck. In this galaxy, you're more optimistic than I thought. All right, if not luck, then sheer stubbornness. It's seen us through worse. As the Starways sputtered to life, Cashin felt a strange sense of calm amid the chaos. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like they were on the cusp of something potentially game-changing. The tribunal would deliberate. The planets would continue their cosmic game of chess, and Cashin would be right there in the thick of it, throwing wrenches into the works and hoping against hope that they were making a difference. And as they soared into the stars, Cashin couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally managed to put themselves on the right side of history, or at least, the side that wouldn't end up as a footnote in some cautionary tale. But whatever the outcome, one thing was certain. Cashin Voss was not done yet. Not by a long shot. The Starways limped through space as gracefully as a three-legged gazelle, groaning and sputtering like a pensioner in a marathon. Cashin leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his weight, a testament to the ship's ongoing commitment to disappointment. Sierra looked up from her data pad, her expression a blend of skepticism and amusement. You really think the tribunal will do anything with that mountain of evidence you dumped on them? Cashin shrugged, one shoulder lifting more than the other thanks to an injury sustained in what he fondly referred to as the Great Sentient Planet debacle. Well, they could use it as a doorstop. Or maybe as a cautionary tale in a class on how not to screw up your entire life. The rogue AI collective chose that moment to pipe up, its voice dripping with artificial sarcasm. Oh, I'm sure they'll make a documentary about it. Perhaps call it Voss, a case study in cosmic idiocy. Hey, I'll have you know I'm an innovator in the field of cosmic idiocy. Cashin shot back, running a hand through his hair which was doing its best impression of a bird's nest after a storm. Sierra rolled her eyes, the interplanetary equivalent of a sigh. I just hope they realize what's at stake. The highway needs to be rebuilt. The planets need their autonomy back. And we need less unsolicited commentary from a rogue AI. Cashin interjected, shooting the comm system a glare. Exactly, she replied, though the ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. As they floated through the ink-black void, Cashin couldn't help but reflect on the chaos they'd left behind. The tribunal was knee-deep in an investigation that could reshape alliances across the galaxy. The sentient planets were starting to wake up to their manipulation, and the interplanetary highway was a mess of tangled metal and broken dreams. Do you ever think about what started all this? Cashin asked, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I mean, really think about it. Sierra paused, her fingers hovering over her data pad, all the time. But I prefer to think about how we can clean up this mess rather than wallow in it. Cashin chuckled, a dry sound that echoed in the cramped cabin. Always the pragmatist, and you're always the optimist in disguise as a cynic, she retorted, giving him a sideways glance. I wouldn't go that far, Cashin said, though he found himself musing on the truth of her words. Despite everything, his knack for attracting trouble, the endless string of bad decisions, the overwhelming odds, they'd managed to make a dent. Maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't entirely out to get them. The Starways hit a patch of turbulence, jostling them both in their seats. Cashin swore, his hand flying out to steady himself on the console. Seriously, if this ship had a personality, it'd be the kind that makes you want to punch it in the face. Perhaps it's just reflecting its captain's disposition. The collective suggested, its tone as dry as a desert. Very funny, Cashin muttered, though secretly, he had to admit it was a fair point. Their comms crackled to life, the sound like 1,000 bees angrily trying to form a barbershop quartet. A voice emerged, garbled but recognizable as one of the tribunal's aides. Voss, Sierra, update on highway reconstruction. Progress is slow, but we're making headway. The planets have agreed to cooperate under certain conditions. Cashin glanced at Sierra, raising an eyebrow. Certain conditions. Sounds like they've been taking lessons from a used car salesman, Sierra snorted, or a politician. Same difference. The aide cleared their throat, clearly unamused by the peanut gallery commentary. The tribunal would like to request your presence for further discussions. Seems your unique perspective has stirred the pot. Unique perspective, Cashin echoed, grinning. That's diplomatic speak for you've made a right mess of things, right? Something like that, the aide replied, and Cashin could practically hear the eye roll through the comms. We'll be there, Cashin said, cutting the transmission and leaning back in his chair. Looks like we're not done yet, Sierra nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's a start. And honestly, I've grown fond of this chaos. Makes the void feel a little less empty. Cashin chuckled, feeling the weight of the universe settle a little more comfortably on his shoulders. You know, for a galaxy that's always trying to kill us, it's not half bad. As they navigated the treacherous path back to the tribunal, Cashin contemplated the changes rippling through the cosmos. The sentient planets were beginning to assert themselves. The AI collective had been brought back into the fold, and the interplanetary highway, a symbol of unity and dysfunction, was being pieced back together. For all the cynicism he wielded like a shield, Cashin couldn't deny that they'd accomplished something. Whether it was a step towards order or further chaos remained to be seen, but for now, it was enough. Arriving at the tribunal space station, Cashin and Sierra were greeted by a scene that looked like a bureaucratic nightmare. A sea of robed figures bustling about, data pads in hand, and expressions ranging from mildly annoyed to utterly exasperated. Feels like home already, Cashin quipped as they disembarked, earning a snort from Sierra. They were ushered into a chamber much like the one they'd just left, though this time the atmosphere was more charged with anticipation than disdain. Cashin scanned the room, noting the mix of faces, some familiar, some not, but all wearing that same expression of worn-down hope. The head judge greeted them with a nod, his previous skepticism now tinged with a grudging respect. Voss, Sierra, welcome back. We have much to discuss, and by discuss you mean more accusations and threats, Cashin asked, crossing his arms in a show of defiance tempered with amusement. The judge cracked a smile, something Cashin hadn't thought possible. Not this time. It seems you've managed to turn the tide in your favor. Cashin exchanged a surprised look with Sierra, who arched an eyebrow. Does this mean we're not on the chopping block anymore? For now your heads remain firmly attached, the judge replied. The planets are negotiating terms for autonomy and the highway is set to reopen within the next cycle. It's a new beginning. Cashin felt a strange sensation in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, maybe, or at least the cynical approximation of it. Glad to hear it. But let's not break out the champagne just yet. The universe loves a good curveball, Sierra nodded in agreement, her gaze scanning the room with sharp focus. We'll be ready for whatever comes next. As the meeting continued, Cashin couldn't help but reflect on the odd turn of events. They'd come so far, yet there was still so much to be done. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential pitfalls and unforeseen challenges. But for the first time, it felt like they were on the cusp of something different, something better. The tribunal adjourned, leaving Cashin and Sierra to navigate the bustling corridors once more. The collective chimed in, its tone unusually sincere. Well, look at you, Cashin, a regular revolutionary. What's next? Abolishing taxes. Don't get ahead of yourself, Cashin replied, amused. I'm not that ambitious. And yet here you are, changing the galaxy one snarky comment at a time, the AI noted, its voice laced with admiration. Cashin grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he'd do it all over again if given the chance. Guess I just can't help myself. They returned to the Starwies, the ship's familiar quirks and noises welcoming them like an old friend with questionable taste in music. As they set course for their next destination, Cashin felt a strange sense of peace amid the chaos. "So, what's the plan?" Sierra asked, settling into her seat with the air of someone who'd seen it all and then some. "The plan," Cashin echoed, his mind racing with possibilities. "The plan is to keep doing what we've always done, fly by the seat of our pants and hope we land on something soft." Sierra laughed, the sound clear and genuine, cutting through the tension like a knife through static. "That's not much of a plan. It's worked so far," Cashin pointed out, his eyes on the stars as they streaked past. The universe was vast and unpredictable, a swirl of danger and opportunity. But for the first time in a long time, Cashin felt like they were part of something bigger than the sum of their mistakes. The interplanetary highway, the sentient planets, the tribunal, all pieces of a puzzle that was slowly, painstakingly coming together. And as they journeyed onward, Cashin found himself looking forward to whatever came next. Whether it was peace or chaos, he knew they'd face it head-on, with sarcasm in their hearts and a stubborn refusal to give in. Because in the end, the universe might be an uncaring void, but it was their uncaring void. And as far as Cashin was concerned, that made all the difference.